Well, Tara, welcome to the show today. Great to have you on. Wanted to talk to you first of all about MND, which is a subject close to lots of people's hearts. I've written a lot about it in the Daily Mail actually, and met some incredible people on the Doddy Age bike ride from Edinburgh to Rome for the My Name's Doddy Foundation in 2024, and it just a remarkable experience. I think if I could sum it up, I would just be really frank and say it was one of the best 2 weeks of my life and most inspiring, most enlightening, and just to meet so many just amazing people along the way. And of course, at the end, to raise a lot of money was just, it made everything, worth it. So you've been through this with your family. First of all, tell me what happened and what this whole experience has been like, because it's been pretty tough.
Yeah, so sadly in July 2024, my mum was diagnosed with motor neuron disease and sadly only survived 13 months with the disease before she passed away on the 24th of August last year. We had an absolutely brutal time with this disease. It took absolutely everything from her, one thing at a time, from her speech. After diagnosis, it was only 3 weeks before she completely lost her ability to speak, and then it was losing her ability to eat, then move, and she suffered 2 bouts of pneumonia in her last 3 months before she just couldn't fight any longer, sadly. And yeah, one of my huge things that I'm trying to achieve with the foundation is really just speaking out about how it really affects not only the person with MND, but it ripples through a whole family and a whole community. And in my opinion, things need to be a lot better. But things like what the foundation are doing, just like you've said about Doddy Aid, for regardless what I'm doing for the foundation as a daughter, really gives me hope and strength with everything Doddy Aid wise. And like I said in my podcast a couple of weeks ago, it kind of helps turn my grief into something positive. And everybody always says, what can they do to help? And getting involved in things like Doddy Aid and rallying around, just £20 honestly makes such a difference and keeps us going towards our goal of a world free of MND.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm really sorry to hear about your mum. That's just a terribly sad story, really tragic. And, she didn't live long. And a lot of people with MND, they manage to live for up to 5 years. And some people are lucky and they survive even longer than that. But take me back and tell me about what happened and tell me a little bit more about Claire, your mum.
My mum was just the most wonderful human being. She worked in a primary school teaching, additional needs assistant, helping. She worked one-on-one with autistic children, and it's quite a tragic irony in that she helped people speak when she lost her ability to. But my mum was incredible. Obviously, being a professional golfer, she's followed my journey from the very beginning, and she's been there through everything. From she always had my bag fully stacked of snacks and juices and the likes, and it's just been was the absolute greatest support to me my whole entire life, and I was so incredibly lucky to have her as my mum.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the world of sport, they do, they say that they owe their parents a lot, and their parents are a huge part of that journey. Particular sports, I suppose particularly so, things like swimming, for example, but golf, when did you start and when did your mum become a part of that journey for you? Was she always there, and did she encourage you to get into the sport?
Absolutely. As you do in sort of when you're at high school, primary school, you try and um, do every sport, a little bit of everything. But it was kind of early high school that I really decided to play golf. And both my mum and dad were absolutely incredible when it came to supporting me. Obviously, in the middle of winter in Scotland, you're sat at a driving range watching your daughter hit 100 balls every single night. It can't really be much fun, but they were there regardless. The amount of sacrifices they both made to take me up to Edinburgh for Scottish golf weekends and all over the country, it's something I'll honestly never be able to repay, because their encouragement, their drive for me, they supported me in every sense. And I think the most important thing about my parents was they always kept me grounded and enjoyed just always focusing on the game. And I think that's enjoy kept the focus on enjoying the game. And I think that was a huge part in me wanting to turn professional, is that's kind of how I was brought up. You see so many people having pushy parents, and my mum and dad only ever wanted to just see me be happy and flourish. And I think that's how I've got to where I am today in the game.
How old were you when you first started? Because you come from golfing territory. You live very near to North Berwick, in the heart of some of the best golf courses in the country.
Yeah, I'm absolutely spoiled here. I think in every town or village you drive through, there's at least 2 golf courses, so I'm really not stuck for golf where I live. But obviously, I grew up in Hawick, and I was actually a junior member at North Berwick, so always came through here. My parents got me a junior membership there, so I could still continue to play through the winter. So again, that was another sacrifice they made, gave up their weekends to come through to North Berwick. So I think it's very fitting that I now live in Gullin so close by. Yeah.
At what stage do you get to? Because it's such a tough sport where you go, actually, you know what? I think I'm pretty good at this. I think I can make a living out of this.
Yeah, I think when you go through the Scottish golf ranks as an amateur, you obviously then I was lucky enough to represent Scotland at both girls and ladies international level. And it's at that point you kind of have that inner belief that, well, is this something I can take forward? So I played a few professional events as an amateur, which is how a lot of people do it. And then I just remember that feeling is I didn't feel out of place. And people always say that Scottish golfers are always like quite negative and have no self belief, but I think that's completely wrong. But we all have that inner belief. You just see how many girls are on tour now from Scotland. But yeah, I think that was a huge point for me, is sort of jumping in at the deep end, playing a couple of pro events and realizing, oh, I'm actually comfortable here. And I think that was a huge part of me helping make my decision, but also through COVID, sort of not being able to play golf, not having really many events to play, it really lit the fire under my belly, as they say, to really pursue. And when you had the opportunity, it's very cliche now, but life is far too short to not follow your dreams and follow your talent. And that's exactly what I did. And I'm so, so glad I did.
Yeah, that's completely the right attitude. And of course, former Solheim Cup captain Katrina Matthews, she's from that area as well. So did you ever have any dealings with her, and did you use her as inspiration? Because she's achieved so much as well in her career.
Yeah, she absolutely has. Through our Scottish golf camps, she was always on board, giving advice at all of our camps. So she was incredible, and she really does show that even when you've finished playing golf, there's so many other opportunities for you. And somebody like her just is a real role model to so many of us female Scottish pros. Absolutely.
Is that the kind of level that you'd like to reach, just while we're talking about the golf side of things? So the moment you play on the LET Access Tour, tell us a bit more about that and where you want to go with this.
Well, for me, obviously, I've played. I turned pro in September 2021. Obviously, in the past year, I took a step back from golf to care full time for my mum, because that's what she needed at the time. And for those since 2021, my professional golf career has always felt really clear in my goals. But obviously, since my mum was diagnosed, stepping away wasn't an easy decision for me. But it was the only one that mattered. That, in my opinion, golf could wait, but she couldn't, and it's evident with only 13 months that she couldn't wait. She became my priority. I prioritize spending quality time with her over golf. But stepping away and sort of coming back to it now, it's given me a lot of perspective based on everything that's happened. It's not who I am, should I say, and my love for the game is still there, and the belief that firmly my journey isn't finished yet. It's just reshaped my outlook on my career, and it's not really just chasing results now. Rankings, it's about playing for a purpose and playing for my own purpose, but also playing for my mum and honouring my mum through all of it. So, um,
Yeah, I'm sure it's given you an entirely different perspective. So take me back to what happened with your mum and the beginning of MND. How did you find out, and how did it all start?
oh, my mum began experiencing slurred speech at the beginning of 2024. First, it was just a couple of words she'd say a bit funny, and then it was more and more. Speech slowed down, and it sounded as if she'd had one too many glasses of wine. That's my best way of describing it. And then, obviously, from there, we kind of knew something wasn't quite right. So, obviously, we had so many. We went to the doctors. She had every test under the sun, and we were going down the route of the fact it might be a stroke, and that she would lose her ability to speak. So even that was quite hard to come to terms with. But I just remember them telling us, "Oh, it has to be bad. Like it has to be bad for us to even pinpoint what this is." And you think, well, not at that point. I never thought something incurable, like something that's not got a cure, is going to come out of this. And well, sadly, a few months later, when she began having issues swallowing, it lit up like a Christmas tree. But it was MND. I was actually away at a tournament when my mum and dad found out, and they waited until I came home to tell me. And I just remember sitting in my living room and them telling me that. And the first thing I said was, "That's what Doddy had." That's the first thing. And I just, even with that, I feel shows what a impact the foundation already had on me, that's how you think about that disease, is that's what Doddy had. And I just remember that feeling of, this can't be real, this can't be happening to you. Well, that was just the worst feeling. Of between that and the end was two of the worst feelings I think I've ever had. I think it's also the fear of what's coming. You obviously don't know, everybody's journey is very different, but it's just knowing that there's no treatments and currently no cure for it. It's just the worst, absolute worst thing in the world. Absolutely. Yeah.
Can't imagine what that must be like. I mean, you speak to some people who are told that they have MND and they don't know what it is, and they think that it's something that's curable or it's maybe not that bad. And then, as you say, you hark back to Doddy Weir, and especially in Scotland, especially if you follow sport and you've seen what the foundation have done over the last few years, there is no escaping it. And I think probably for you, this was the case as well. It's because you saw the decline in such a strong, towering character, full of life, such as Doddy, and, you know, the images when we saw him on the pitch on his, you know, in his final encounter. And I guess because you can see the physical decline as much as anything else, although he was, you know, amazing right to the end. And for a child to know that your parent is going to go through that and not live must just be devastating.
It is. You think your whole life you've had your mum, like I've said, supporting my golf career, just supporting me. She was there on my wedding day, to then suddenly, I think it's living in the fear of not knowing when and how it's going to happen, and there'll be no clarity on that. I think one of the hardest parts for me and my family was, you're grieving them while they're still here, because right now it is a death sentence. And like you said at the beginning, you don't know if it's going to be a year. You don't know, she could still be here in 10 years. I spoke to a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and his wife's had it for 12 years. And you think, and I think as a family, there's a complete helplessness in watching someone you love facing something so cruel. And you've basically got your hands tied behind your back. No matter how much you want to do, I want to fix it, you absolutely can't. And all you could do is try and make her life as easy as possible. But because my mum obviously lost her voice, I can't even begin to think what was going on in her head, that she just couldn't communicate with us and how she felt. And that's probably one of the most heartbreaking things about it. Yeah, it's just, I actually read a quote the other day that said, how privileged am I to have loved someone so deeply that my grief is this heavy? And I just think that's the most perfect way to sum this whole thing up about how I feel about what I've gone through. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about grief, and how you carry it, how does one carry it? I consider myself very fortunate that I haven't lost a parent yet, but I can only imagine in your situation in particular how just awful it must be. But that side of grief, how do you get through the day?
Me and my dad has had each other's backs. We worked as when I say work, we were just the ultimate team, and we're so lucky to have each other. We leaned heavily on each other, and obviously, having just got married to my husband last March, he played a key part in this. The three of us together just got each other through, and that's a huge part of why, when I say it ripples through a family, it really, really does. I might be having a better day than my dad one day, and I'm there for him, but then the next day I fall. That was a huge part in us, that we were just a real family unit. And one of our most important thing is we never wanted my mum to see us suffering. I think, to be honest, minus the hospital side of things, it's the after mum's not here that's probably been the hardest part, because it got you through that. I only ever wanted to see her laugh and be happy, and that does kind of shut you off from grief to a certain extent, because all the beautiful pictures I have, like I look back at my wedding day, I look about all the places she came to watch me play golf in our final few months. Her smile, her just love for, she accepted her life was going to be shortened. And I just think that was the most magical thing about her. So how could we be sad when she was living that way? And she was a huge advocate of, don't let this disease take more than it already has. And that's how we lived as a family. It's all you can do. It's the famous thing, you're surviving, not thriving. And that's exactly what we did for those 13 months.
How did she handle it when she found out?
We all had a bit of a cry, but like I say, she was just superhuman. You could see a huge shift in her that, like, I can't even begin to imagine when you're sat in a doctor's room and told there's no cure for you, and there's not really any treatment for her either. But like I said, all she did was keep relaying the message that don't let this define the next however long. Let's live life to its fullest. Let's do things that we've never had the chance, and just live every day like it's your last. And that's exactly what she did, because as much as you know it's going to happen, she had her 60th birthday party 15 days before she died. She was incredible. She was driving 10 days before she died. And then it just happened. So I'm so glad we and she decided. She was really the reason we kept going the way she did, was because that's how she wanted. Because and she did do absolutely everything she wanted, as much as she could and wanted to do in that time, and that's just what really helps me every day just now, knowing that she could.
Yeah, absolutely. Did she still come out and watch you play golf? Did she help you with your bags or anything? Was she able to do anything like that after she was diagnosed?
Yeah, so these are probably my favorite memories of our time with her, in terms of golf. That she, after diagnosis, every instinct told me to kind of stop playing, take a step back, because it was the middle of the season for me. And she wasn't really having any of it, because that's the type of person she was. I just remember having that conversation with her, saying, no, I want to stay at home, forget about the rest of the season, and let's do what we want to do here. And I just remember it taking all of her strength. It was one of the last few things she'd said, that, again, life didn't end with her diagnosis, and me playing golf allowed her to see so many new places and countries, which, what can I say to that? Obviously, I have to keep going. So through my golf, kept playing, not just for me, but for her too. And in a way, me continuing to play golf and chase my dreams helped keep hers alive too. Yeah, and it was just one of these, golf became one of these things that MND couldn't steal our special moments on the golf course. And I remember the first event after her diagnosis, she was caddying for me and she was pushing my bag, and we'd always have the snacks, and regardless how she was feeling, she always made sure I was okay, and that's just how she was. Yeah, just absolutely incredible. Just thinking about those times we had together. She saw Lake Geneva. We had a beautiful time, the three of us. Me and my mum and dad on the front of Lake Geneva have the most incredible photos, and I think if it wasn't for golf, she would probably never have gone there. She went to Spain, she went to France, she went to Sweden, and just to think of all these amazing places that a sport can have on such a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice that she had those memories. So, at what stage did she start losing her voice and then going downhill? Because, as we discussed, 13 months is quite quick.
Yeah, so obviously she was diagnosed in July, but then within the month she'd completely lost her voice. So when she caddied for me, there was no form of communication at all from her, and that's when she was also struggling to eat and drink. So imagine going through that and then still wanting to push your daughter's bag. Like, what's going on? And that's just how she was. She never let it phase her. And I think it's clear from our story that everything just happened so quickly. And you're in no control of your life, your outcome at all. And what happens, you're just literally just surfing a wave and just waiting for it to take you out. But we always followed what she wanted, how she wanted, especially me and my dad. Everything we wanted was out the window, and we really just lived by her rules. Well, we did that our entire life, but even more so now.
So, was she quite mobile then? She sounds like you say she was driving, just shortly before she passed away. So, physically, her body wasn't that badly impacted. It was mainly her voice.
Yeah, she was. This is a crazy thing. She was fully mobile. We had our 60th party and she was dancing. um, she was fully mobile up until probably the last 2 days before she died. She would get off her bed onto the toilet, or go for a shower or anything. And it was only in the last 2 days we had to begin moving her around the Margaret Carey in a wheelchair into the bath, etc. But she could still use it. She was just very, very weak. And if she had recovered, she would have still been on her feet again. And that's what's just so alarming about this disease is, like, physically she was fine. Everybody in our Hoyt always said you wouldn't know if you saw her. Like, you would have no idea, because she was just walking, she was doing her shopping, she was holding a basket, everything, like, as if normal. And the really sad thing about it is, as awful as the end was, I am so glad she could still do everything she wanted to do. She took up lawn bowls, she could crochet with her friends, she could come round the golf course with me, she could do all those things. I think that was a huge part of it, was she still had her independence, and it wasn't until the last couple of weeks she really didn't. And yeah, and you see a lot of people obviously in wheelchairs, and that's sadly, like, that we didn't even get to that stage, because obviously respiratory issues overcame everything.
Do you think that in the long run has made it easier? I mean, the end is never good and never easy. But as you say, when she passed away, it sounds like she was still pretty much full of life, and not quite the mum that you remembered, but much more the mum you would have remembered than if it had gone on for far longer.
I think I actually had this conversation with my dad the other day. As awful as it was happening so quickly, and that last week especially, with how much the pneumonia took over, it was her way of looking after us, because we didn't have to go through the wheelchair. And you see people, for example, when I ran the extra mile with Kevin Sinfield end of last year, and you see people with MND in wheelchairs with ventilator masks on. We did have to have that discussion as a future thing, and the sad thing is I'm sitting here thinking I'm lucky because we didn't have to do that, and that's what this disease brings you to, these awful conclusions, and it's not right at all. As I said, me and my dad had the conversation that she was always looking after us, and I feel like this was a way of her looking after us as well and protecting me and my dad from having to do that, because having to do it was awful enough for a year that will take. I'll never ever recover fully from it properly, but to see these people who've had it for 10, 15 years, poor Kyle down in Wales in a hospital for a year, immobile, it just absolutely breaks your heart. And like I said, I got to dance with her 16 days before she died at her 60th birthday party. Those are things that really get me through every day.
Were you with her when she passed away?
Sadly, I was on my own with her. So in the Margaret Care unit at the Borders General, they had guest beds in the room. So for the previous 2 nights, I'd slept with her, because when you can't speak and you are the way you are, there's nothing. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like just waiting for somebody to come in the next day and having a whole night by yourself. So we were watching trashy TV shows all the way almost through the night, because I could tell she was scared. And she could probably obviously tell that I was too. So even when I think back to those last few days, we had the most beautiful time, just the two of us. And I'll never ever forget just us sharing. I think it was Below Deck we were watching. And yeah, I was on my own, and my husband Angus and my dad arrived sort of 20 minutes after. But again, I wasn't expecting really for it to happen. She was in a bad way. The nurse had come in and said, I think you should phone your dad, get him to come back. And obviously Hoyt's about 20 minutes from the hospital. And I'd set a couple of steps outside the front door, and the nurse came running after me to say, I think, like, come back, like, now. And if I hadn't have sprinted through the unit and got to her, I probably would have missed it as well. But something that really helps me is she wasn't alone. And as horrible as it is for me to remember that time now, she wasn't on her own, and she never was. So that's really what, when you think about grief, it's that obviously doesn't help the case either. But one day it would have been worse if I wasn't there or somebody wasn't there with her. So it was a fitting end to our life together, I would say.
You're an absolute credit to her, Tara. It's a very emotional story. I wanted to ask you about the foundation, the My Name is Dottie Foundation. At what
Yep.
stage did you start doing things with them, and did you speak as a family about Dottie, and did you think, actually, this is a path that we could go down as well as a family, to try and reach out to them and for help, for support, but also to raise vital funds?
Yeah, so obviously, like I said before, when we first got a diagnosis, the first thing I thought of was that's what Dottie had. So, and yeah, actually, we reached out mutually kind of to each other at the same time. Obviously, we decided as a family to go public with it, and it was the best thing we ever did, because of that. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of support that the foundation have given me and my family. But for me, I'm just trying to think the right wording. For me, you've got one or two things. You can either admit defeat or stand up against it. And my mum, my family always wanted to stand up and fight. And even when I organised my Drive for MND challenge for the foundation, my mum asked, how do I donate to it? And I said, it's for people. It's for you. You don't have to donate. So it just shows even somebody with MND how much she wanted to support the foundation, and how I feel so strongly about wanting to find a cure. Because I've said in a lot of things I've done previously was the day that person gets looked at in a hospital room and said, there's a cure for you, and this is the treatment, and this is what we're going to do, is going to be one of the best days of my life, because it's people like my mum who have helped get to that stage. Yeah, so we began doing a lot of things together, and obviously them asking me to become an ambassador for them was just, I'll never forget when I told my mum that. She got very emotional, and it was only because of her that I was able to get in that position and be able to do something meaningful. And she's always been about helping others, and that's all I want to do, and that's all me and my family want to do. Allow people to know that they're not alone in their MND journeys, and everybody's experiencing it in different ways, but we're all one community. And I think that's a huge thing about the foundation, is we're all just a family community.
What do you think should happen now with MND and funding for it? Because there's been so many drives to get more funding, and I know there's been chats with politicians, and there's a lot of research going on, but actually so much of that work has been done by the foundation itself, and they've got an incredible group of people who are working behind the scenes with the foundation. And I know that trials are underway all the time. But do you think that there should be more help from the government? Do you think that more money should be put into this?
Without question. With me sharing my story, it's not just about my personal story, it's about trying to contribute to a broader impact for the MND community and what the foundation are trying to achieve, a world free of MND. For me, it's always about raising awareness to the challenges people face. I think it's 1 in 6 people get diagnosed every day with MND, and there's no treatment. And I just think there's an urgent need for better research, treatment, support, funding, and especially to help the way people are cared for with the disease as well. I've said it previously that if the Rob Burrows Centre down in Leeds was available to us, we would have driven down there if it was open at the time. My mum was really struggling with her pneumonia side of things, and that's only one specialist centre. When we were in the Margaret Care, all it said was Macmillan cancer, 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 cancer. And that's just not good enough when you see firsthand what this disease does to people. And I really just want to try and follow in Doddy's footsteps, extend his legacy of challenging the system. Me and my dad were sort of advocating for my mum in terms of how they should treat her for her MND, and that should never ever happen for a family in crisis, not medical professionals at all, directing her care in a hospital in crisis, in an A&E ward. And I just think so much more funding needs to go into the medical system for doctors to not come in. I think I read something somewhere that sometimes I think it was one of the comments on one of my articles actually was, I think a doctor might only see one case of MND in their whole life. And I found with every doctor we spoke to, they were so confused by the disease and had not really it was such a lack of knowledge behind it. It was, oh, well, why is she making that noise? Well, that's the MND making that noise. Or just, it's such a lack of understanding. And I saw that firsthand on the front line. And I think there has to be more, as much as it's going into research, but also to doctors on the front line to be able to treat people and know what MND is, know the challenges it has, rather than my mum sadly was just treated for pneumonia, and that's not how it should be at all. And that's what is so disappointing in it.
I mean, I've spoken to people who have MND, and when they were diagnosed, they were literally told in a room, "I'm really sorry you've got MND, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it." And it's quite brutal. It literally is as brutal as that. I don't know how you cope with that. You've got the hellish moment of knowing that you've got this incurable at the moment disease, which is going to kill you, whether you like it or not. But two, where is the help? And how do you manage those years ahead, however long that might be?
I think the scariest thing for us was my dad directed a lot of the ideas that actually helped my mum day to day, which is just absolutely outrageous to think about it. He had a career selling racehorses, and for example, my mum was really struggling with secretions in her throat. That was one of the worst things that got her down day to day, and that was her probably biggest issue, symptom wise. And my dad obviously couldn't stand seeing my mum the way she was, how much of a discomfort it was to her. So thought back to, well, if I saw that on a horse, they'd put a nebulizer on to help. And he suggested it, and he was told, oh, that's a great idea from medical professionals. And it's like, well, why on earth have you not thought about that or recommended it? And it it genuinely helped her. She looked forward to having it on day to day because she knew how much it would help her.
Yeah. Tell me a bit more about Rob Burrows' centre. Would you like to have something like that up here? Because it does seem crazy, given Doddy's background and what he's done for MND across the world, by the way. It's not just in the UK. His
Yeah,
impact is global. Why don't we have something like that up here? So tell us more.
I got very, very emotional when I saw that open and seeing the opportunities it had for people living with MND inside it. And that's why we felt so strongly about getting mum into the Margaret care, because that was the only thing that was available to us that was a palliative care unit to make her comfortable. But again, it was always we're driving, we're telling them what she needs when she needs it. And I think as soon as I saw it, like I said earlier, if the Rob Burrows Centre had been open when my mum was still here, we would in a heartbeat have driven her down there, because as soon as you go in there, they understand MND, they know what's going on, and they can proactively help each person, whether that be one person on a bed with a nebulizer on the next person, with a suction machine clearing their throat out, the next person on an antibiotic that helps clear whatever. That's the kind of stuff we have to see in not just Scotland, but all over. There can't just be one in Leeds. They have to be all over, because the experience we had in A&E, somebody with a terminal illness sat outside an ambulance for 2.5 hours and then in A&E for 11 hours is not, it's not right. And we would have absolutely killed to have somewhere that we could take her that was a specialist centre for this disease. And it was only in our last 5 days, only from my dad literally shouting from the rooftops, we actually got her into a palliative care unit. And that should not be it, because when you're in crisis, you have nothing left. And you just think of all the other people who are dealing with the same thing. It should not be like this at all.
So tell me what happened when she went into A&E. That sounds grim.
Yes, the first time, um, it was just all chaos. Word to describe it: chaos, a zoo, a circus, all of the above. She was taken into A&E. She was in A&E for 10 hours the first time. Nobody really understood what was going on. Oh, can she not have that water? Can she not take that medication? All right, she's got a feeding tube. And me and my dad were kind of directing where they should go, and immediately wanted us to talk about a death plan when that's not even been on our cards yet. Absolute nobody knew what was going on. And that was such a scary thing to experience as a family member. And I think my biggest thing was nobody gave her any hope. It was kind of just, oh, it's MND, I'm really sorry. And that was the hardest thing to take, especially for her. And somehow she fought all the way through that, got through it. We got her home, and she had another 3 amazing weeks at home that you think, wow, she's got through it. And then obviously the next time, the same symptoms happening, me and my dad put off taking her to A&E because we thought it's going to be the same thing again and we don't want that. And it's, can we get her straight into a Margaret Care unit bed? Like, just divert A&E and straight into the Margaret Care, because we know what she needs. This worked the last time, so we just need that. But no, it was tick that box, tick that box, tick that box. An ambulance came. They knew she was coming. We'd phoned ahead and she sat in an ambulance for 2.5 hours outside before a bed became available, somebody with a terminal illness. We then got her into A&E. She was in there for 11 hours, going back and forward, back and forward. After that, she ended up on the same ward, in exactly the same bed, on exactly the same medication as the first time, after going through all of that times 2 again. And again, if my dad hadn't have shouted from the rooftops, she would have died in a hospital ward with 3 other people in the room. And that just, I'm speechless when it comes to thinking back to that experience of, that was our healthcare system with something like motor neuron disease. It was just deer in headlights.
And that was Borders General Hospital, was it?
I've had numerous people reach out to me with very similar experiences. I had a lady reach out a couple of days ago to say that her mum passed away in a mixed ward in Glasgow. And that's happening in Glasgow, this happened in the Borders, what's happening in Edinburgh, what's happening in London, what's happening all over, like worldwide. It's absolutely, we don't know the half of it, and that's the awful, awful thing.
So would you call on the government then to, well, I guess do 2 things. One, put more funding into MND and research, but also to create a centre such as Rob Burrows Centre?
Without question. You've already been dealt that card and you asked me the question of, well, how do you get through every day? It's made, not that it can get any worse, but it's made even worse when you think you're going into A&E sat next to somebody who's, I think in one occasion, somebody had been stung by a wasp. And you think, my mother, who's got a terminal illness, who's nothing, nobody can do anything for her, is sat next to somebody who's just going to walk out of here unscathed, like, fine. And there has to be places where the Margaret Care was the only place that was available to us that ticked a few of our boxes of calm, care, I just remember the minute we walked into that room, it was just like calm, everything else is forgotten about and we're okay now, we're in here. And that's what MND patients need. We need specialist centres for that. For us, especially the second time, imagine if we could have just taken her into an MND centre, they get her sorted out, put on the antibiotic, immediately we would have absolutely killed to have that available to us at the time, rather than having to experience what we did. And actually, funding has to go into doctors as well, for them to actually be specialist doctors and medical professionals that actually know. Somebody could have come from Glasgow to the Borders if they were a specialist in MND, or we would have taken her to Glasgow if that was the case, but it's not. And that's the sad reality of how we're living right now with this disease.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So Tara, what's next for you? I know that the grief won't dissipate anytime soon. It may never. But what are you going to do in the interim, and what are you going to do to keep your mum alive in terms of how you're tackling MND and your work with it, but also with your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for this year, I'm looking to obviously go back to playing tournament golf. But just for me right now, playing for a purpose and getting back to the tour on that sense. But I'm getting involved as much with the foundation as possible, and doing as much work with them as I possibly can to really keep pushing this message, ruffle a hell of a lot of feathers to actually get some movement going forwards to help them achieve their mission. But I'm definitely looking forward to being back on tour with my friends and family, and just remembering having all the amazing times I had with my mum is something that was one of her favourite things to do, was watch me play golf. And like you said at the start, it's totally changed my perspective on the whole game itself. But yeah, just get back to it this year and just see where it takes me.
If you could say anything to the government now, what would you say? If you're standing in front of the minister, what would you say?
Pretty much everything I've just said. We need change. Change only comes with funding, sadly, in this day and age. And this is the only way that we can move forward to finding a cure for a currently incurable disease. And regardless of big sports stars, it's all the other 480 people in Scotland, in my sense, going through exactly what I have, and it's simply not good enough.
And what do you think your mum would say to you now?
Gosh, you're gonna get me emotional. I just think she'd be really proud. I'll never forget when she saw my photo come up on the Doddy website as a ambassador, and she just had such a sense of pride in me. And I think seeing her photo all over the papers the last few days, she would just be so proud. I hope anyways that I'm doing all of this for her, and that her death has to mean something, and that's why I'm really driving what I am, because not just her death, but everybody else who gets this diagnosis that has no hope. Yeah.
Tara, you're an amazing person. Thank you so much for telling us your story. And as I said earlier, you are an absolute credit to your mum. She'd be really, really proud of what you're doing. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.